Just let me save you! Ooh, sorry, one second, I got a Twitter notification. I'm nothing if not self-aware. Hello, interwebs, I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to my review of the latest episode of Doctor Who, Dot and Bubble. And yes, I'm in a slightly different set today because I'm actually filming a video for my main channel, so I figured I'd just do it in the nice fancy set with the makeup and with the nice vest on. It just looks nice. I'm putting a little extra pomp and circumstance into this one, so you better appreciate it, dang it. Don't leave me. I need you. I need your validation. Anyways, on that note, yes, we are talking about Dot and Bubble, and I have to say, as per usual, I'm going to go full spoilers here. I'll try and stay mostly spoiler-free up top and then get further into spoilers as we go. But to start off, what I will say, though, is if last week's episode 73 Yards, which was personally and still is my favorite of the season, lost a lot of people with its ending, for me, this episode was completely made by its ending, because for most of this episode, I thought it was a kind of fun, but mostly bog standard critique of our social media era that I've seen in many other science fiction shows and movies before. I think most overtly Black Mirror, while not exactly about the same thing, had a very similar episode to it a couple of years, probably even more than a couple of years ago, a few years ago. And so, you know, even when I saw the trailers for this episode, I was like, yeah, I get it. This is an episode about people who are quite literally stuck in their bubbles and are not able to get out of it, even when people are literally screaming at them to try to break out of their little bubbles of interest and their little echo chambers. And I'm like, yeah, that is a good thing to critique, a good thing to talk about, certainly an issue that we face in the modern era, and that's something rife for discussion within a sci-fi setting, and in Doctor Who in particular, but it is not something particularly fresh or unique, especially in the very, like, pastel-y, overly saturated style that this episode was going for, that again I've seen in stuff like Black Mirror. I think the Orville did an episode on it too, in a similar way. So I was sort of curious to see what this episode was going to bring in terms of doing something new with it. And for most of the episode, like I said, I really didn't feel like it was doing a ton new with it. Like, there was some fascinating things going on here, but ultimately I was like, yeah, this feels okay. Until we got to the last 10 minutes or so, and I have to say, wow, was not expecting this episode to go in that direction, and I freaking loved it. Like, it just made the whole thing for me. Well, I'll talk more specifically about that in a second, but I just wanted to get that, like, spoiler-free bite off my chest, because I literally just finished watching the episode for the first time and then sat down to do this review, and I'm kind of still buzzing off of the ending, because I was like, wow, that was a really bold choice, and honestly hits kind of the nail on the head, and I really adored it. Let me turn to a negative with this episode that is partially not this episode's fault, but kind of speaks to the broader context of this season. This is actually weirdly, I want to say Dr. Light, though technically not, because he is kind of present throughout the whole thing, but in a large way it is a very Dr. Light episode, as well as a Ruby Light-esque episode. And it feels to me that this was filmed, and I'm just speculating here, but we know that Ncuti Gatwa had to miss the filming of last week's episode, 73 Yards, because he was filming some stuff for Sex Education, and it feels like that was the same case here, that they filmed the predominant amount of this episode without Ruby and the Doctor, and then got them in on a green screen months later after they'd done the principal photography to shoot them on the little social media windows that we got. And so it was like, oh, two fairly Doctor-esque light episodes right after each other, or at the very least ones where I feel the presence of the production decisions on the episode with terms of, like, scheduling of the actors. And it just leads me to wonder two things. One is, like, when were you scheduling this where, like, Ncuti it wasn't necessarily as available as he should be when you're, like, filming literally, like, what is it, a fourth of the entire season, considering it's only 8 episodes, and you don't really have full access to your lead actor? Just interesting to me, though it did present two interesting, I'm sure, writing challenges for Russell T Davies, which I'm sure he took in full force, and certainly, I think, managed to pull some really great stuff out of doing that. So sometimes you know, actual like physical constraints create some creative opportunities. So I think that's a lot of fun. But it does sort of lead to this larger issue Again, there's only 8 episodes, and my friend Vera of the channel Council of Geeks, who's also my co-host on the Jumpgate podcast, I know she has a video coming out, I believe this weekend, called 8 Episodes Is Not Enough, where she kind of discusses a problem that I agree with her on, in that with very episodic television shows like Doctor Who, you feel the weight of there being less episodes. You don't really get a chance of normalcy, a sense of normalcy of like, here's just a fun, weird romp where the Doctor and Donna do some weird, like, mystery solving stuff. Or just some like random one-off, escapade that feels like a normal episode. And then every one of these episodes has to feel like a big event, a big thing. And this is something that even Star Trek, I think, kind of falls into in the modern era with like Discovery and Picard. And I think Strange New Worlds actually kind of breaks the mold of this actually a little bit really well, where like Strange New Worlds, well, it does have like big event episodes, like it's, or Dex crossover episode or its musical episode. It does have like what feels like typical everyday episodes, like, oh, this is just them doing some Enterprise stuff today, and I like that gradation because it makes it feel a little bit more like I'm getting to hang out with these people, and you don't really get that often in this era. I mean, 26 episode was too much way back in the day, 26, 24, 22, but I feel like 10, 8 now is too short, and I feel like there has to be a better middle ground. But bringing it back to this episode, though, considering we're getting 2 Doctor Light episodes, or at least structurally distinct episodes that kind of sideline the Doctor and Ruby, or at least them in this episode. Ruby wasn't really sidelined last episode, but at least the Doctor, it just sort of, it makes me feel like, oh man, I miss that era of just the fun David Tennant and Donna, or whatever companion, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, just doing a bog standard fun romp, and we don't really get that. And so again, that's not this episode's fault necessarily, but just having those 2 type of episodes back to back really, it just stood out to me, even more so than I think it would have otherwise. Now let me talk more about the meat of this episode, though. First off, considering they were probably just on a green screen somewhere, Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson knocked it out of the park with their acting. I loved Millie Gibson kind of playing, and you could just tell this in her acting choices, that when she first comes in to speak to Lindy on the screen, she's playing it like, all right, the Doctor failed. He's an idiot boy. I know how to talk to this very social media centric girl. I can probably get, like, just be having the patience with Lindy and like knowing how to speak to her in a way that the Doctor's more like, hey, I gotta save you, gotta go, we gotta do this thing, wouldn't be able to do. And I just love that. Like, they both, I think, nail that dynamic without it ever being explicitly stated. Like, you just understand from their performances the conversations that must have happened between us seeing them on the screen talking to Lindy. I thought it just was really great just for them to sell that dynamic just off their performances, with all that subtext is there, but it's not like in the actual text, like the script. I thought was so excellent, so loved that. But as we got into the episode, like I said, for most of this, I found it to be kind of okay. I was like, yeah, I get it. Bubble. People are in bubbles, and even when people are literally screaming at them that something's happening in the world and people are dying and people are getting hurt, people won't leave their bubbles and will stay in their little echo chambers. Certainly was probably very relevant at the time that this was written, and certainly has become even more so recently for reasons that I will leave on the periphery of this video, but you can certainly fill in the blanks there. But yes, certainly a dynamic that should be discussed, but not necessarily one that's fresh. What I did find grating, though, was Lindy. And I understood why the episode was playing with her being annoying. She kind of had to be, with this sort of like very pompous and just full of herself attitude, like, oh, you're so dumb, or come on, like just the attitude she had towards the Doctor and Ruby, and I was just kind of getting just bothered by it being throughout this whole episode. She's just this stuck-up asshole this entire time, and I had thought the normal direction of that arc for a character in an episode like this would be that she would kind of learn to get over herself a little bit because she's in such a radical situation and the doctor is literally there saving her, that she would kind of humble herself. I mean, that's the kind of arc we've seen in numerous episodes of Doctor Who, especially when we are made to center on her character. Like, certainly there's been episodes where we've had the asshole, like, rich person not learn their lesson and do the wrong thing within Doctor Who, and even specifically in Russell T Davies' writing throughout history. I'm thinking, what was it, Harriet Jones, Prime Minister? Was that Harriet Jones? I believe it was her name. But yeah, she had kind of an arc like that, though she also kind of became sympathetic at certain points later on. But, Russell T Davies has had that sort of arc with some characters before, but rarely when it's the main character that we're focusing on. Generally, you want to come to like that character and understand and empathize with her, which is why when we do get that twist and she betrays Ricky and does give the Dot his actual last name and makes him get targeted first so she can escape, I was like, oh. So her being a stuck-up asshole and not changing at all was very much part of the point of this episode, because this episode just ends on the fact that these are rich assholes who learned nothing. That no matter what, they just feel that their place and privilege will protect them from anything, and really have no understanding or context for the not only the dangers that they have faced, but the dangers that many people have faced around them and are much more set up to be facing danger, and we're willing to throw people into the grinder in order to protect themselves and their way of life first. And certainly, it was not overtly the text of the scene, that line at the end where you literally have Ncuti Gatwa, a black man, screaming, "Let me save you," and their response of these mostly white people saying, "Don't let yourself get contaminated," which has very racist connotations to it. I certainly don't know the specific history of black folks within the UK, but in the United States, certainly the idea of being contaminated by being around or in proximity to black people certainly has its history, and I would assume there's something very similar in the UK. So again, I don't think that was the overt text of the scene, but certainly that dynamic in the casting of all these actors was very much there. I'd have to go back into the episode, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Was there any people of color in the Fine Town place? I certainly don't remember any black folks there. There may have been some other folks, but I certainly don't remember any black folks right off the top of my head. So that certainly was probably an intentional dynamic on the casting part. Maybe I'm misremembering, so let me know. But if so, that's a really, I think, subtle but effective thing to put in an episode like this. So kudos on them if that was the intention there. What else? I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, just the rest of the episode was fine. I think they built up these monsters, these sort of slug-like things, fairly well. I honestly wish we had gone a little bit longer without seeing them, but their build-up at the start of the episode was certainly great and made for some terrifying vibes in this very pastel-y world. But once they got revealed, that kind of passed very quickly. The other element, too, of the reason this was happening, the dots, was the dots gaining sentience and basically an evil AI storyline who learned to hate humans. On the nose, fine. Again, it's one of those things where I don't think it was the intent of the episode really to focus on what the monster was. So it's kind of like, oh, we'll do the stock AI becomes sentient, wants to murder all humans thing. And certainly you come to understand it given how frustrating and annoying and just anger-inducing Lindy is throughout the episode. So you're almost like, yeah, I kind of get the AI to a degree. Maybe I'm not so genocidal, but certainly understand the feeling. And so yeah, that felt very stock. And again, it wasn't really the intent of the episode to get at that being the core issue. So it's not something that bothers me too much. It's just more like, yeah, been there, done that, seen that kind of thing before. But I did also like the reveal of the fact that it was alphabetical order, because I got it just before the Doctor and Ruby got there. But technically the clues were all there. We kept seeing everyone's name the entire time. So theoretically you could have pieced it together beforehand. And those are the kind of reveals that I do like, where it's like, oh, you could have pieced it together beforehand, and you do get it just a second before the episode actually states it, so you feel like you've oh yeah, I got it along with them. And then it tells it to you for anyone who may have not gotten it to that point. And I'm like, That was just very effectively done, I feel. The only other thing to mention with this is Susan Twist, who, by the way, thank you everybody in the comments. Last week, I guess I have to eat a little crow on this, where I said, like, oh, Susan Twist, if that's your real name, because obviously she's appeared in a lot of episodes. We have this sort of running theme of there's always a twist at the end, so I was like, okay, there's no way her real name is Susan Twist. Evidently, her real name is Susan Twist, so I'm an asshole, I guess. So apologies to the actress Susan Twist. I guess Russell T Davies just found that too funny to not make somewhat textual within the show with the big song and dance number at the end of the episode. But I thought it was just something they made up, but apparently is her name. So I'm just a jerk, evidently. And speaking on Susan Twist, she does appear in this episode again as the mother, and we do have another moment where obviously Ruby and the doctor, recognize her, and Ruby kind of vaguely recalling the events of 73 Yards, though can't really quite place it seems. So I like those little shout outs there. So again, just a running mystery. We now know that is going to be whatever comes up in probably the finale with her. So that is there. Ultimately, though, like I said, that's pretty much everything I think worth discussing. All I'll say, like I said, is this is an episode that was made by its ending. What I think, really just strong punch, and makes some of my problems on first watch of this episode, such as the fact that Lindy was just so frustratingly annoying and incompetent and just it just bothered the hell out of me, makes so much more sense because it built off of that emotion, because I'm just like, I really don't care if she dies or not. If she dies, I'm not really going to be that upset. And the episode plays that. It plays on that in numerous ways, both with the AI and the end reveal. So just very smart on all of those fronts. So another great episode of Doctor Who. What did you think of this one? I love all your thoughts down below. But as always, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.